Okay. All right. So who wants to go first? Don't everyone rush for it at once.
Sorry, I was AFK for a second, and I'm still kind of AFK. I didn't. Thought we were gonna wait a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Do you think Carl or anyone else is joining?
So I guess I'll go.
Yeah, go for it, Mike. You actually had some interesting posts, emails to me over the weekend.
Sure. So Vlad and I have been exchanging notes on category theory and Casper stuff. So we talked about fault models. We talked about economic incentives. We also covered categories, lots of different examples of categories, also functors and adjoint functors, getting prepared to, and a little bit about what monads were. As far as the type theory stuff, I sent you some stuff about the graph-enriched category that we'll be using as the top in the Méliès-Zailberger construction. So if you take a term calculus, turn it into graph-enriched Levier theory, take the free model of that on the empty graph, you get a graph I'll call G. Then you have a collection monad, and we're looking at collections of edges in G. If G is, if our collection monad is sets of, then collections of edges from G are effectively just subgraphs of G. But in other collections like lists of G, where we'll have, lists of edges of G, an edge can appear twice in different locations. So we have to come up with some notion of a map between collections. And one obvious notion is just taking a graph homomorphism from G to H and mapping that over the collection. But in the case of lists, we may also want access to the index. So I think in general, we may want access to the location of the element.
Yes.
Some way of saying where in the tree or list or set this element appears. And then there's a fairly obvious notion of graph transformation extended to a collection. So you map each vertex in G, you assign an edge in H. And you just map that over the collection as well, is one straightforward way to do it. But you may also want that one to be parametric in the location. But this thing that we get has some connections to the covariant power graph construction, but it also applies to any graph homomorphism. And we get a certain class of graph homomorphisms from the term constructors, which means that we can, there's a special subset of the edges in this category I just described. Sorry, the morphisms in this category I just described that correspond to those. So we can type all of the term constructors with these fantastically more complicated types than just the ones that come from the theory. So this is where we get all of the formulae for the type system. And then there's another subset of the edges that come from the collection constructors. And I think those we type as well, but those are the ones that give us the subclassing relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I mean, just to put this in context, then we utilize these constructions to generate the type system for Rolang, for example, and in a similar fashion, we're using types like this for the trace. The consensus as trace construction as well. Most of the work I've been doing is focusing right now on implementing a lot of this, and in particular, first just getting the untyped language to the point where we can start writing down untyped contracts, and that's going. And then the next step is to add the types and then implement the type checking using the algorithm that arises from the constructions Mike is talking about. So we'll very, very shortly be able to demonstrate in a working fashion all of the results that we had from the paper that we wrote last year about this time, where we write down a version of the DAO and then type check it and see that the type checker actually catches the race that is the bug in the DAO contract. So all of that will be available as a part of a larger tutorial on Rolang.
So that's it from me.
Cool.
So quick question. Are you saying that you use ladle on the trace structure?
Yes. Yes. So the way we build the trace monoidal category, ladle is a part of the underlying type system. So there's sort of two levels of construction. There's a process calculus that's essentially row calculus on which we have the ladle generated types. And then we build a trace monoidal category over and above that.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, I think I see what you're saying. And then, but the trace monoidal category is itself some kind of like computational thing.
Yeah, it's its own computational thing. Actually, Mike and I spent some time looking at if we could simplify the condition, and just have like a language that talks just about the trace monoidal category without, that was sort of more axiomatically presented without any of the row calculus stuff underneath. I mean, there's some stuff there, but it's there's a lot more built into the trace monoidal is it applies to a lot of different situations where you want to force the agreement. So essentially the end construction can force an agreement, but it can force an agreement between partial functions. It can force an agreement between relations. It can force an agreement between stochastic relations.
Well, I mean, you can find anything that implements the type, anyways.
So it's a more general construction. But when you want to apply it or interpret it in the setting where you're talking about, a bunch of distributed processes, and you're using the trace to force that, you need enough apparatus to be able to identify, oh, this is actually these processes are distributed in the sense that they're non-located, but they're communicating. They're non-co-located, but they're communicating. Right. And that's much harder to see when you're looking at partial functions, right? It's much harder to see when you're looking at relations, and you can code it up, but it's a lot easier to see if the construction, begins with, a notion of computation that is built around distributed processes.
Okay. Anyways, let's see if anyone else has an update. I mean.
Yeah. Can people hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Yes.
I hear you just fine.
I guess the updates from my side are that I've been starting to kind of formalize the new version of Casper the Fortress rule and start to write it up into something that might hopefully become the next version of the mock paper. And there hasn't been too much interesting on the research front, except for the fact that I revised a couple, I found a small mistake in my simulation of griefing factors, and which makes it slightly less favorable. But so basically, for example, if half the validators go offline, then instead of the online validators losing 20%, they lose 25%. But it's still a fairly small change. And otherwise, on the actual technical front for Casper, not that much. On the technical front for sharding, I have, so first of all, I did make that sharding mind map, which I just tweeted about it a couple of hours ago. But also, I put on the, I was starting to think about how do we basically roll out sharding faster in a way that possibly doesn't have the full level of security for every shard, but which still accomplishes the goal of increasing capacity for those applications that want increased capacity. And I came up with this fairly simple way of doing exponential sharding that basically just does random sampling, and it just assumes that the random sampling works. The idea being that if at some point something does screw up, then we'll basically just figure out how to fix it in the next hard fork. And I would claim that if we can get something at least even 1 million ether into the deposits that the validators get sampled from, then we can have something that's should actually work pretty reasonably well.
So what kind of? So I'm assuming you don't. Well, when you say that there's not the same amount of security on every shard, and that you're sampling them.
So basically,
I'm not exactly sure.
So the idea is that you have a validator set, and from that validator set, and then you would have a tree of shards, right? So you'd have you would have the main shard, and then that shard has has its own state, and then it has two children, and then every shard has two children and its own state. Mm-hmm. But then every single block only has to get assigned by 40 randomly sampled validators. And the idea is that if at some point, any one of these shards gets 20 validators that are bad, then basically, yes, those 27 validators can get an invalid shard in and potentially deny all future access to that entire subtree, and at least until hard fork fixes it. So it relies heavily on an honest majority model of depositors.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty uncomfortable with that. I mean, but have you considered something like shard side chains, basically? I mean, just side chains, basically, using just a penalty gadget to make a pretty lightweight side chains.
Yeah. So the idea is that this isn't supposed to be the final version. This is supposed to be basically a sort of transition technology, and be explicitly encouraging people not to put high value stuff on it. We'd be encouraging people to put decentralized Twitter on that shard, on those shards or whatever. And whenever the next hard fork comes along, we can try to kind of buttress it up with data availability stuff and proxies and so forth.
Sure. I mean, I guess I just don't. So here's kind of a question. Imagine if we did side chains with the validator set being chosen by a contract in the kind of parent of the side chain, right? Because every side chain kind of has a parent in some way, right?
Yeah.
So if you had like, deposits on ETH that led to the creation of a side chain with like some number of validators, and those deposits went on that chain, and we used finality gadgets to check back and forth. It was back and forth. Then I think it's kind of easier and more of a layer 2 solution, and does almost exactly the same. Each shard could itself have each side chain could itself have 2 side chains. And
wait, hold on. What do you mean?
So imagine like the ETH has a side chain which has itself 2 side chains, and each of those have 2 side chains. And the side chains have this rule where you place deposits in the parent chain, and they're kind of, in some way, they're like you can only withdraw your deposits from the parent chain if you didn't get slashed in the child chain.
Right.
And they're each kind of, and so they're provided at different levels of security. And if one of them fails, it's just like a side chain failing. It's not like the whole global EVM state, or like, somehow the EVM is still just on the one blockchain, and these are just like side chain environments. I don't know. Anyways, I feel like there might be things that are more easier in terms of the commitment to backwards compatibility. Like this, if you do side chain, the nice thing is that, like, okay, well, it's not really that much of a stronger commitment to backwards compatibility than we already have. If we put state on different shards, and we kind of like have this kind of commitment that it'll exist forever, I don't know. Like, I could just see it being a little messier, but I guess like I haven't spent that much time thinking about it.
Right. So what exactly would you say is the difference between a side chain and a shard?
Normally what I think about is the way that cross-shard transactions and reversions and incentivization kind of works.
So in this,
in sharding, I would have something like a single validator set list, a single like full node protocol, light node protocol, and I would also have like anti-censorship resistance, say, of calls from one shard to another.
Right. So the
whereas like side chains kind of, you have the ability to.
Is that in my initial one? So in my initial sharding proposal, I'm like I don't have any kind of cross shard interaction at all. Basically, all I have is some unspecified way of moving coins initially into shards as part of a hard fork, and then a promise to make a future hard fork that'll make a move back again.
Oh, right. So, crazy. Yes. For me, like the side chain mechanism kind of deals with the quote unquote moving of funds, because they're really just like, pegged assets. But I guess we could call them, I'm not like, I prefer like not to call side chains shards, but I'm not sure that what you've done is exactly side chains. Do you think would you call your system side chain similar to be side chain system?
Would I call what?
Your sharding to be like side chain, like a bunch of side chains?
Not really. Like, to me, well, the other thing is that side chain, like, the other thing, I guess, is that I consider, like, side chains I generally consider to be loosely coupled, whereas this is like theoretically tightly coupled. Although it's like a weird kind of coupling because it's backed by future hard forks and not so much like current protocol details.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of, I see how it would be easy to implement. It seems a little hacky. How we still, but I guess we might still hope for like an order of magnitude improvement in the gas, in like the kind of Geth and Parity's performance which
Yeah.
maybe would increase the
I
penalty.
don't know. I'd rather not count on that sort of thing.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess I kind of have a few updates. Nothing too exciting. I've been working on the kind of ghost, like Casper the Friendly Ghost, for kind of the correct by construction ghost rule estimator. This protocol. And I found that it actually it has much more safety than I thought. I mean, there was like really simple examples where like we kind of get safety much more quickly than I would have anticipated. And actually, it has to do with the fact that I'm like kind of restricting the messages and where they're allowed to go, because like they kind of have to go on the longest chain that they've seen. Like there's like less possible futures because of the reduction in the arbitrariness of where blocks go. That like kind of that like for example in the binary, I just kind of let arbitrary DAGs go ahead. In this like blockchain thing, there's and there's like there's a block is invalid if it's not on the longest chain, even if it's not an equivocation. And so this kind of restricts this people's moves, which means that like I end up having finality more with fewer messages than I was like many fewer messages than I was doing before, which is kind of interesting and surprising in some way, but also cool, and kind of points me also to this idea again that like lower latency or like leader-free protocols have higher overhead than blockchains do. And also round-based protocols have higher overhead than blockchains do. It's kind of interesting, and especially if you're thinking about overhead per block. At the same time, blockchain making requires somehow stronger synchrony assumptions than making some. So it's really kind of I was pretty impressed. Basically, I made a 3-block blockchain, and like the first 2 blocks were safe. Like just like 3 blocks on the Genesis block, and like with 3 validators.
Right.
And like the 3 blocks in a row, and those 2 blocks were safe. Basically, it was impossible for them to build on a blockchain that did those blocks. And and this is kind of assuming no equivocations, so this is kind of safe in the kind of most vanilla consensus sense. So that was kind of interesting. I have been hanging out with Georgios, and we've been talking about kind of problems in mechanism design and what we do, kind of frame and like rephrase like a lot of times we have in crypto in terms of like more explicit mechanism design language. One thing, and also like kind of how obvious some problems that we have are like it's that like mechanism design people haven't like really looked at them, at least as far as we're aware. Like the main one basically is like the idea that you only have like partial information about the strategies due to the fact that like you only see some outcome, some kind of indirect outcome people do. I guess this is kind of like maybe related to the fact that like game mechanism design people are normally thinking in kind of more of like a legal context than say a cryptographic one, or you have like adversaries who can like potentially forge messages and like kind of lie about what they did, or like like the idea of like somehow that like the agents need to prove what they did. Using some foreign to a mechanism, which is a program, and you try to like and it has to like kind of incentivize some behavior, and there's basically like a.
Can you repeat that whole thing because you're lagging a lot?
No. So
Is he lagging for you guys? Or is
Yeah,
it-
he's lagging for me.
Yeah.
I can't understand him at all.
Do you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
What was the last thing that was like legible?
Just like
Or,
the last like 30 seconds, I would say.
It wasn't so bad that I didn't catch the sense of what you were saying. I mean, it sounded like you've been looking at mechanism design, and mechanism design has a different set of concerns than merely cryptographic.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have a different set of concerns, like kind of general, like usually they think about, say, mechanisms that have some fixed amount of funds that are going to be distributed to everyone, and therefore spend a lot of time looking at, like, zero sum games. There's and basically, like, game theory also. I was looking at like a whole bunch of results in game theory, and like the it's like surprising. I mean, some of them are genuinely interesting, but they're not really applied to mechanism design at all. Like the problem of, like, say, like, how do you efficiently find the Nash equilibrium of a game is something that they've spent a huge amount of effort on. But when in our mechanism design problems, it's like almost like whenever we have like an objective economic problem, anyways, we have like a clear equilibrium. We don't have to like solve for it. I mean, it's the invariant that we start with, right? So there's a kind of sense in which, like, there's a whole bunch of like game theory literature is applying to problems that aren't super relevant to what we're doing, because in our mechanism design, we only look at a very kind of specific class of games that under, like, this kind of like also kind of esoteric choice models, and it's kind of interesting. And then the mechanism design stuff that they normally look at is things like auctions and certain people selling stuff, trying to get as much money as possible, or like and truthful mechanisms is kind of a cool thing where basically you would essentially, like, the way I understand that, like, they kind of came up was that you would send over your utility function to the mechanism, which would basically represent you, and then no matter what other people did, it was always the equilibrium for you to send your utility function. So like the result, so like any game can kind of be changed into one of these games where, like, instead of like choosing the rational strategy, you just send the utility function over to the mechanism and it chooses the rational strategy for you after it like collects all of the, after it chooses, somehow it chooses for you after it collects everything. And so, like, it's a kind of neat model, but there's like an issue there because of the kind of locality of the computation, where basically, like, your optimal behavior may actually be, in our context, a function of like your local view. As we can't exactly like ship our utilities to the mechanism and have it choose our strategy.
It sounds like a Doctor
For
Who
us
episode.
to execute on that. Sorry, what was that?
I was saying it sounds like a Doctor Who episode. All you have to do is send us your utility function, and we'll play the game for you.
Yeah, it's
Very
kind of very interesting. Sorry, what was that, Pete?
It's kind of like the revelation principle.
Yeah, that's exactly the revelation principle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's like it's a very interesting thing, right? Because, like, for us, we don't exactly have a revelation principle, but we do have a similar goal, which is that, like, our choices will be independent of other people's choices. Like, in our strategy choice should always be follow the protocol.
Yeah.
But we there's like some sense that we want truthfulness, or some properties that are similar to truthfulness. We don't exactly have truthfulness. That it's not exactly the goal, right? We can't really. I don't even think that truthfulness is like a realistic goal. There's so like somehow, like, our context, like, draws the line somewhat differently than traditional game theory and mechanism design kind of focuses of research, but you know, the hope is that we can get some of these people to pay attention to like our problems.
Hmm.
What else?
Hold
What
on,
else?
sorry, I'm just watching the network like a hawk because the banker ICO is happening and our blocks are full, and there might be someone who's spamming the network at 53 GUI to prevent anyone from participating in the banker ICO.
Oh, lols, that's crazy.
I'm not sure how much they're actually succeeding though. They might not, and they might have given up already because there are a bunch of buys that got in. I'm waiting for my phone though to sync to see if, you know.
Right. Yes, I think that's about all for me in terms of updates. One kind of side interesting update maybe is like I slightly improved my recovery protocol for social recovery by like adding secret sharing to it so that like the salts can be recovered nicely. So that like your network doesn't need to know who the network is. So like, you know, you get 3 or 5 for recovery and 3 or 5 of them can put together the seed that is used to like prove that they're actually in the network. So I thought that was kind of neat, but it was like, it's not really that exciting.
So I can give a quick update on the implementation front. Essentially what is my focus is the Casper validator, and particularly the change that I made just recently was making it resemble the PyEth app kind of full node with networking, some kind of like networking simulation, just so that it can be very close to the actual full node implementation when we you know, move to a test net or, you know, whatever else. So there'll be some good simulations soon, and then hopefully move to full nodes even sooner. Well,
Cool. And just for everyone else, would you mind posting the link?
sure.
Thanks. Is that everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
We could we could spend a bit of time talking about sharding, since that was maybe one of the more interesting points in this conversation so far.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see if I like understand your goal right. Basically, you want to make something that you know, can be implemented a little bit faster, but that we can iterate upon, and that like, you know, won't pose like, you know, any kind of basically where any failures are easy to recover from with the hard fork.
Vitalik, is that a summary? Is that a decent summary of the goal?
Can you repeat the decent summary again?
Yeah, sure. So you want to make a version of sharding that can be implemented kind of in on a shorter time frame, that will be something that where all the failure modes can be recovered with a hard fork, and something that can be iterated upon easily.
Yes.
So like kind of 3 to 0, ease of implementation and ease of recovery from failure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in terms of like security, i.e. like prevention of failure,
basically we're relying on an honest majority assumption and a probability assumption that like nothing, or well, basically if an attacker has something like 2 to the 70 or 2 to the 80 hash power, they'll be able to grind the probabilities in their favor, but like we're counting on that not to happen. And we're also counting on like there being at least like 1/2 or 2/3 on its majority in the deposited ether.
Yeah, and what's the finality process? There's like independent finality process for every shard?
No, so basically it just kind of relies on the main finality process.
Okay.
So the idea would be that if you want to get finality, the thing that you would personally need to know is that, like, first of all, you want to know that the state root of the shard is included in the main. It has the Merkle branch going up to the main state root, and that main state root is an ancestor of some finalized checkpoint. And the second thing you want to be sure is you want to be sure that like all the blocks up until that point on that shard are available and valid. And the idea is that there would be like a social gentleman's agreement that for every shard where that happens, then like their future hard forks would kind of respect that.
Yeah, as long as the blocks are like later seen to be valid, I guess that will fly.
Exactly, yeah. But like if there is some shard where like one block is missing or one block is invalid, then like basically the future hard forks will attempt to create making maximally reasonable solution.
There needs to be like some kind of social consensus on the fact that like that the initial state of the hard fork chain somehow is exactly a kind of last known valid available state.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with that concept because that's kind of how we hard fork to recover from invalid or unavailable blocks that have been finalized. So
How do you get to a place where you finalize an invalid block?
oh, it's a failure mode. I mean, it can happen. Basically, if finality only takes like some threshold and they're all Byzantine, then they can finalize an invalid block. So do we have any information on this blockchain stuff, Vitalik?
Yeah, so it looks like if it is an actual attack, then it's probably not. Then it looks like it's probably not working. And so the current most likely theory is that the people who are sending the 53 Shannon gas price are just like regular users that are trying to kind of rise up above the banker spam and get in the chain.
Okay, and basically it's to do this crowd sale or something.
Well, no, the 53 gray stuff could just be all sorts of random applications. The 50 Shannon is the limit for the banker sale, right? Because like, there's a banker sale, if you include a transaction with a gas price that's higher than 50 Shannon, it doesn't count.
I see.
No.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Oh. Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be so easy to just reward the miner without using the gas price.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know a miner.
Would you need to know the miner, or could you just essentially say, like, write a smart contract, which, if executed by, is the amount that you want,
sure.
and then
You basically you need to like notify the miner of the opportunity
Yes.
to engage safely in the transaction.
Yeah.
Cool. So it seems like we've covered the gamut for today.
Yeah, I'm still curious to think about this sharding thing, but I'd be happy to go back to time also.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested as well, but yeah, I mean, well, at some point we should sit down and have a more detailed discussion rather than just a stand up on kind of the relationship between sharding and namespaces, because I think we might be able to achieve a lot if we think this through from that point of view. But it's going to be a more detailed conversation. Speaking of which, Vlad, just circling back, I'm going to be in Berlin in the first part of July. Are you in Europe at that time?
Yeah. What's the first part? I mean, so
Like, I think we get in around the 4th.
Yeah, so I'm definitely in Europe by the 4th, but I'm not going to be able to be in Berlin until maybe like 10th or 12th or something. I'm not exactly sure. I have to look at my calendar.
Okay, all right. We might just miss each other then. I have to be back here for the 15th. So.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking about coming to Seattle on maybe in the next like couple weeks.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be really great.
Yeah. In terms of namespaces though, like there's like one. Do you mean like, how do we decide what contracts go on with shards, or do you mean like have different shards for different types of applications, or?
All of that, but like to me, the name spacing is what allows you to determine when transactions are causally related versus when they're isolated. And once
Oh, I see.
information, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think
to make.
I think scheduling is a lot easier in that context.
Yeah, not only is scheduling a lot easier, but also fault tolerance suddenly becomes a lot easier.
Oh, interesting. In the sense that like you can measure which faults might cause like a reversion.
Yeah, exactly. So it impacts everything. It impacts finality. It impacts everything. Basically, what it gives you is a way to decompose the state space. If all transactions are built around IO on names, and so then an algebra on the names gives you an algebra on the state space. And once you have an algebra on the state space, then you can much more effectively reason about faults, resilience, and attacks.
Yeah, I mean that sounds super interesting in terms of research, but doing basically like the kind of only really tenable proposal for doing static analysis on Ethereum transactions that I've seen is basically giving contracts the ability to restrict the messages that they're like the shards are allowed to contact, and then like kind of rewarding them for that, one way or another, as opposed to something where current VM contracts will no longer be able to do the kinds of crazy stuff that they can do now, like grab an address from a computation and call it and have that address, potentially anything.
Yeah. I mean, when addresses are names in a namespace, you can still do that. You just know what the causal implications are.
But the thing is that you can't know from statically analyzing the transaction that caused that call, because it's going to be a function of the state in that contract.
Yeah, but the important thing is, it's going to, like, if another transaction is working in the same namespace, then you have to be careful. If they're working in isolated namespaces, then you don't care.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that information isn't in the like you can't see that from the transactions in our context, like the Ethereum.
Yeah, and in the Ethereum contracts, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like for us to like add to like to kind of have that, we need to have like some basically like contracts need to have like special types or like restrictions on where they can send calls if we want to kind of have this information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we should just. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I don't think it's like a stand-up update. It's a deep dive.
I hear you, but it also it leaves the problem of how to start the EVM. There's still the unsolved problem of how to do it without this type of information, or without the isolation information, which I think is still possible. I mean, it might be that there ended up being like kind of fundamental DOS amplification kind of strategies for certain atomicity guarantees, but I've yet to be convinced of that. I think that we can make it work for the EVM as is without this isolation analysis.
Mm. Cool. I mean, there are lots of different things you can do if you're willing to lose a few bits on an address. If you take an address and you say, well, I'm gonna treat it as a smaller address plus some dispatching information. You can still recover a lot of the same ideas. But again, that's a longer conversation.
What do you mean by some of the same ideas? Sorry.
Vlad, are you still there?
Yeah. Sorry. What did you mean by like a lot of the same ideas?
What you can do is you can take a namespace over which you're currently depending, and you can say, well, in reality, these names are, just this portion is the naming information, and these other bits here are dispatching information. So you can play tricks like that and shoehorn in namespacing information underneath an existing. Like if you have a flat address space, you can do that sort of thing. And there are a lot of virtual memory schemes that do that kind of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I still don't see how you'll be able to like in the kind of train complete environment, be able to tell for sure what where like the call is going to go, like from like static analysis.
Where the call is going to go. I mean, it depends on where you are. It depends on where you are in the code. Like if you're asking, can you determine whether or not a subroutine, in general, a subroutine is going to go to A or B? No, you can't. If you can guard that with an arbitrary computation, right? You can't determine that.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you know, for example, that A or B, must have this shape of a name, regardless of which one you take, then yeah, you absolutely can tell whether or not the outcome of the test statement is going to impact some other address or not. Right? That much is easy to tell. So you just look at the union of the two namespaces and you say, well, is this other transaction inside that union or outside that union? And then you're good to go.
Yeah. So that sounds like something where like we're not gonna like easily have, because like then like an address, doesn't need to be in some pre-specified set. Is basically just some like 160 bytes. Or
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, if you didn't build in the namespacing from the beginning, it's a lot harder. It's a harder problem.
I think.
Wow, you're lagging to the point where I really can't. I'm getting every other syllable. Christian, can you hear it, Vlad?
No, he's lagging.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Even if you did, okay. So I get like a piece with car, and then like only transactions on like the top shard to be able to call everything, but that it is it's not, it doesn't come for free, right?
Hey guys, I'm gonna use the lagging as my cue. I'll catch you next week.
That's
All right.
good.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, Rick.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
You gotta watch out for that.